So the reality is that most of them even claim that they are God and yet are claiming something completely false. So yes, it's of no surprise whatsoever that these things are happening.
Okay. Are you familiar with Abraham Hicks and the teachings of the law of attraction?
Yes, of course.
Would you say these teachings are not true, as that is where a lot of the information listed above, so a lot of the previous information, is coming from, among many other supposedly reputable channels?
Yes, let's discuss this idea or concept of reputable channels.
Yep.
I think I've stated quite clearly in my feedback to her now that most of these channels are not reputable from God's perspective.
Yeah.
They are severely distorted channelings from spirits who have no idea what the actual truth is, channeled through people who have no idea what the actual truth is, to other people who have no idea what the actual truth is. And at the end of the day, none of them are interested in finding out what God's truth actually is, because God's truth will confront you emotionally, intellectually, and otherwise. And most of these people have no desire to be confronted because they wish to hold on to their current opinions. Now, all of the so-called reputable channels, including the lady who channeled Abraham, the so-called group of spirits calling themselves Abraham, even those groups of spirits are falsely claiming who they are. So you can't expect to channel accurately material from a group of spirits who are not even portraying themselves to be the people they actually are.
Yeah.
Like, they're lying about their own identities, let alone, or falsely portraying their own identities, let alone the material they're presenting. So yes, the so-called reputable channels that exist on Earth, there are none as far as I can see. You've got to change your condition. And that's why we started doing channeling now with you and I, because we want to demonstrate the fact is, why are we channeling a whole heap of different material than every other channel is channeling? Well, it's because we're channeling a whole different group of spirits, and we actually know when we're getting lied to. We actually know when the information is false. We actually know when there's a problem with what's coming to us, and we can do something about it. The average person on Earth doesn't know any of those things because their condition is an agreement, and the average channel on Earth doesn't know those things for the same reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these people, like reputable refers to having a reputation. These people do, I think.
Well, they have a reputation because they feed the addiction of people.
Exactly.
And they sell their mediumship to others. And people buy it. They live off people buying it. There's no donation system or gift system or anything. They buy it from them. So already that's not reputable from my perspective or God's. Yeah. But it is reputable from the person point of view of on Earth. In fact, it's more reputable than what we're doing for most people. When we say we accept gifts, everybody goes about that. But we don't charge for any mediumship. And why do these people do it? Because they have a living they earn off of it. They get something out of it. There's a whole heap of emotional addictions that are met through it. And this is the reason why they channel this particular material. And this is also the reason why, from God's perspective, they are not reputable. And when they pass, they will find out the truth, that they weren't reputable actually. And many of these mediums, because they have taught untruth and shared untruth and spread untruth on Earth, pass in a dark condition, and as a result have many, many difficult emotions to work through before they come to terms with the fact that they actually channeled falsehood on Earth. It's also damaging to the whole channeling process, because it's a terrible lie to channel a whole heap of false material, saying that it's true, have a whole heap of people believe it, and then those people pass and find out that it's untrue. Right? That's a terrible lie that's being perpetrated upon humanity. In addition, it's also very, very damaging to the people that are on Earth, because they don't make an effort to find out what God's truth is after they've heard this rubbish. And unfortunately, hearing the rubbish doesn't cause them, because it appeals to their emotional condition, it appeals to their addictions, it appeals to what they want to hear. It's exactly what they want to hear, in fact. Then there's all this stuff that comes to the Earth that's just rubbish, but unfortunately, nobody knows it, or very few listeners know it is. And unfortunately, it finishes up catching sincere people who are seeking truth. And unfortunately also, it muddies the reputation of true channels, of people who are channeling accurate information and who know the source of that information, and who know and know that it's true. Rather, so what it does is it distorts. So this is why people like her husband think it's all a bunch of rubbish, because there is a whole bunch of rubbish getting channeled. It is just rubbish, and unfortunately, the average person who uses any logic can easily see it's rubbish, right? But unfortunately, there are groups of people who just like to hear it because it feeds certain emotional addictions. It feeds a certain emotional condition. They want to believe it, so they believe it. Just like a person who believes in Christianity wants to believe it, so they believe it. A person who's a Muslim wants to believe it, so they believe it. There's a lot of pressure, family pressure, societal pressure to believe it, so they believe it. It's the same in New Age circles. There's a lot of pressure to believe it, so they believe it. Right? None of it's true. But what else can I say about it? None of it's true. And it, like, I'm not saying this to attack the mediums. These people could channel higher spirits, but unfortunately they will have to firstly get into a better condition of love from God's perspective, not from their own, before they'll be able to do so.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything specific about the spirits, the Abraham spirits, or the medium?
Well, no, that what I said applies to them as well as it applies to the spirit who channeled the Course in Miracles and the spirits who channel all sorts of material, like, you know, that are currently being channeled on Earth today. All these so-called reputable mediums who are all charging money, distributing books, charging money for these channelings, and they all, you know, do it without giving it as a gift. And the main reason why they do that is because they're in codependent addiction with these spirits to get the material out. And it's like Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. You know, there's some truths in it. There's some truths in the Abraham Hicks stuff. There's some truths in the Course of Miracles, but it's very, very hard to find when the condition of the spirits and the condition of the people who are channeling it are not in good enough condition to know whether it's God's truth or not. So it applies to all of these so-called reputable channels. My suggestion is, if a person's probably reputable, it probably means they're feeding the addictions of a large group of people.
When you're notorious like us,
like we are,
or infamous like us, then it's, I don't even think we're widely known enough to be called infamous, but, you know, it's because we're not meeting people's addictions.
And not meeting the addictions of the spirits. See, the spirits have also a vested interest in this kind of channeling. See, when we don't meet the addiction of the spirits, like the ones who channel for Abraham Hicks, for Hicks, for the spirits that channel the Course of Miracles, these kind of spirits don't like us, and they don't want us to say what we're saying. They don't want us to expose what the truth is, and so they want to attack us as well as get any person on earth to attack us. So they have a vested interest in not hearing the truth. Not an interest in actually understanding and knowing God's truth. Now, all I'm interested in is understanding and knowing God's truth, and that's why every interaction we have with spirits is based around God's truth, and every interaction we have with spirits always finishes up helping the spirits, and it's very rare for us to have an interaction with spirits where the spirits share information from the spirit to us that we don't already know or aren't already aware of.
Okay. All right. This one's not really phrased as a question, but I'll just say it. I haven't seen you discuss time and the possibility that it does not exist in the same way as we think of here. You have kind of talked about
I have talked about this, but the reality is, again, the spirits who talk about the non-existence of time, all are spirits in very poor condition. The reason why time does not exist to them is because they have they are aware that they're not going to die, and therefore they're not conscious of anything other than what they're doing right now. They're not trying to plan for the future because there's no need to plan for the future so much anymore, because planning for the future is usually done by people who are afraid of the future. So the reality is time does exist. And who knows? There may be places in the universe. When I say who knows, there are places in the universe where time slows down and where time speeds up. Time is a flexible concept where time can slow down and time can speed up. Yeah. And this is what Einstein's theory of relativity was talking about, really. Yeah. Now, from God's perspective, there is no such thing as time, really, because God exists outside of the universe. Now, as we approach God, we get into a condition where we're less and less and less concerned about time. And I believe eventually, the more we come to approach God, the more we'll finish up feeling that time, that time can be examined from all times, if you like, and
from all angles, not a specific point that we exist within it.
Yes, and from God's perspective, God can touch to all time. However, in this universe, time cannot be reversed. Everything moves forward from the current position onwards. Yeah. And this is something that we must understand. In fact, a lot of chaos would be caused if this was not the case in the physical universe, and also in the spirit universe, by the way. Time does move forward. There are events that happen that were past in time. And in the spirit world, every single spirit, when we speak to them, you will find that they all have, while they say, oh, well, time's different for us than here, of course it's different for them, because emotionally there's no negative connotation about having a limited time. But the reality is there are events that happen in the past and there are events that happen in the future. Also, we can only do a certain amount of things on Earth in a certain period of time. The more progressed you become, the more you can compress into a shorter period of time. So you're capable of doing more and taking more actions in a shorter period of time than you would be here on Earth, right? And this is one reason also why spirits say time is different in the spirit world, because the more you progress in the spirit world, and the more aware you become that you can accomplish a lot more in a shorter period of time.
So it seems as if time that was there before, a time that existed before, suddenly it appears to them that it's not the same. It's the limitations
for example,
of time.
A celestial spirit, if I give an example. A celestial spirit, 5 minutes ago, between now and 5 minutes ago, might have accomplished what we accomplished in 100 years on Earth. So from their memory's perspective, 5 minutes ago, they did a whole heap of things that we would be remembering 100 years ago have done. Right? So can you see straight away that because you can accomplish such a large amount of things in a short period of time, you now have a different concept of time. You now realise that this can be done, that can be done, this can be done, that can be done. And when you come to Earth, you feel the limitation of the slow down of how everything works. So here, everything feels like, oh, it's really slow. And this is why spirits often do not get times right when it comes to predictions. Because from their perspective, it's going to happen just next week or the next moment.
It feels imminent.
But it might be 100 years for us before that happens. Right, and it depends on what kind of spirit is sharing that information as to how far forward they can actually see.
And it also depends on how the medium interprets the feeling from the spirit. The spirit has their feeling is, oh, it's just going to happen really soon. So the medium picks up this feeling, it's going to happen soon, when really it's just that they feel that it is pretty soon, 100 years' time. A
celestial spirit feels 100 years' time is very soon. But also celestial spirit knows that in 100 years of Earth time, they can accomplish an immense amount of tasks in that time. And so you can hardly even remember if somebody says, what were you doing in the spirit world 100 years ago? You go, wow, that there's a lot that's passed between now and 100 years ago. And to remember all of that requires a desire to go back to the events of the day and try to work out and remember what happened. You have a memory of it all, but it is so obscured by the number of events that has occurred in that time that you almost forget what's happened unless somebody brings it up.
And just something else that occurred to me while you were talking about the linear, that time is
Time is still linear.
Is linear. There's a past and there's a future.
Yes.
And things did happen in the past. And the very nature of the way God's designed causes and effects
universe.
And our human soul,
Yes.
the issue of there being a cause relating to a past event.
Well, there's a lot of laws actually that are governed by time.
Yeah.
The law of compensation is one, the law of cause and effect is one, the law of forgiveness, the law of repentance, even divine laws of divine love are governed by time.
And and if time wasn't linear, then the whole working of the law
Wouldn't even work.
Wouldn't gel.
Yeah, but I'm quite sure that outside of the universe, not that we're ever going to exist outside of it, I'm quite sure that outside of it, the concept of time may be a complete unknown. God designed the laws that govern time, just like God designed the laws that govern all of our existence. Yes. So yes, spirits see time differently, but there's a whole range of reasons why they do.
Yeah.
And the reason why we don't talk about it much is because the majority of people who have channeled it on Earth have no understanding whatsoever as to why these particular spirits say, oh, our view of time is different than you, and so forth.
Yeah.
Yep. And to us, it's a minor issue. You are governed by time, and all of God's laws are affected by time. However, it's more important to understand the laws than it is to have some kind of philosophical argument about time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'm left in a deep state of confusion over the contradictions from your teachings and the mainstream spiritual teachings.
Well, I think we've covered that subject, haven't we?
Yeah.
You know, I think I've explained why there is a large amount of difference between our teachings and so-called mainstream teachings. And to be honest with you, Kathy, there is no need for you to be confused. It's because of the condition of the people channeling those mainstream teachings. It's very simple.
Well, she goes on to say, to pose a question then, I'd just as soon go straight to God for the answers.
I agree.
As you have suggested.
Yes.
But I've been praying for help for a while now and I can't feel anything.
Yep.
I ask him to show me the errors within so that I may address the causes emotionally. I know you... Do you want me to keep going? Or
No.
Yep. I know you said that if I don't feel anything, this is because I don't want the truth. But I feel like I sincerely and desperately do want the truth. How can I overcome this?
There's an emotion governing you with regard to your desire for truth, and it's fear at this point. So fear is governing your desire for truth. And I notice this occurring in a lot of people, particularly when we first meet them.
Yeah.
Fear is the primary motivator for them to want to know some more truth. Now, that doesn't work with God. Fear should not be your primary motivator for discovering truth. Love, the desire to love, should be your primary motivator, firstly. Secondly, the main reason why you're not able to receive God's love at this point of view is because you're shutting down the flow of emotion. And this is a main problem that humanity faces. There is a lack of faith in God, a lack of will, and also a lack of wanting to feel emotion, right? And these 3 points, which we covered in the assistance group in Cornelius when he gave the talk about what are the main blockages people have, you will find that these are the blockages that the majority of people have that take time to get over. Opening yourself to God's love for most people is a scary possibility. You need to firstly examine your belief systems about God. Now remember that you've had none or very little belief systems about God established. So you're going to need to treat your relationship with God in a discovery process. It's going to, how would you fall in love with your husband, or how would you fall, how did you get to be in love with somebody? You wanted to discover their nature, discover their personality. These are the things you take to God. The other thing, Mary in the assistance group covered a lot of material about how to, develop this desire to truly know God and to also desire to receive truth and so forth. So my suggestion is to go through that material, the assistance group material. And I don't know if you already have, but it feels to me like if you have, you haven't understood it well enough yet. And so I would go through it again and pray about it as you're going through it. The key thing is that while we resist God's love, we are not easily going to understand divine truth. So most of what I teach will be like mumbo jumbo to you unless you receive God's love.
Yeah.
You'll be confused a lot until you receive God's love. Once you receive God's love, the clarity comes then. So focus your attention on the reception of God's love, which means opening your heart to the reception of it. Mm-hmm. And this is where the majority of people are struggling. They don't want to open their heart to the reception of God's love. They're afraid of the changes that it's going to force into their life, that they do not wish to embrace, and they still want their addictions met most of the time. Mm-hmm. And this is a big problem in the USA. Mm-hmm. Addictions are king in most Western countries, and God is not interested in meeting your addictions. So you're going to have to address your addictions if you really want to receive God's love. So there are many things that are inhibiting Kathy from receiving God's love at this point in time. Be patient, Kathy. It's going to require your true, sincere development of a desire, a passionate desire within you to receive God's love. And it's going to require a lot of desire for truth. And it's got to also require you feeling some emotions that at this stage you're very against emotionally feeling. And your surroundings are also very against emotionally feeling. So it's going to take some time to get yourself into this state of developing your will to feel.
Yeah, she goes on, and this is a slightly different take on a similar question.
Yep.
If intellectually I'm 100% focused on obtaining God's love and truth and correcting and repenting for all my sins, how can I get my emotional self or soul to join me?
Firstly, you cannot understand God's truth intellectually. Secondly, you cannot repent intellectually. You cannot engage the law of compensation intellectually. You cannot do anything, in fact, on this path intellectually.
She's saying she's focusing her intellect on those things, correct.
100%. So while you are focusing your intellect on those things, which I'm suggesting that you continue to do, the reality is unless the emotional state is truly acknowledged and engaged, and unless you can truly acknowledge emotionally the process of sin and acknowledge emotionally your addictions and acknowledge emotionally how much you want them, no real change will occur. So you can intellectually convince yourself, and there's many who have listened to us who have intellectually convinced themselves that change is occurring when nothing has actually happened. And this is the tricky thing. I'm explaining a whole heap of words to you. Your intellect processes these words. And unless you can feel, none of these words are really going to make any sense at the soul level to you. This requires you feeling and able to feel God's love. Now, the fastest way is to allow yourself firstly to work on all the things that are impediments to you feeling God's love.
Yeah.
Once you work on those impediments, you'll begin to feel some of God's love. Once you start feeling some of God's love, you will then accept the truths. Truth comes after you have released the error. Yeah. And you are not releasing the error. You are wanting to imbibe truth without letting go of the error first. And this is where most people get very afraid. They're afraid to let go of what they think they know and what they think they feel and so forth. And because they're afraid to let it go, they don't let it go. And then God's truth cannot enter them because a law governing the way the soul operates is this law based on preclusion. You can't have the two things that are opposite each other in the same location. So anything inside of you that opposes the flow of God's love into you must first be released in order for God's love to flow. And what I'm suggesting to you is you're opposed to releasing the things that emotionally opposed to releasing the things, the error emotionally, opposed to releasing the error emotionally as a process, an emotional experience. And as a result of that, your emotions oppose the reception of truth. So while you can accept some of the truths we're discussing intellectually, there's still the soul rejecting those truths until the soul gets into a state of acceptance. Now, can I give her an illustration of that where it's actually happened? God has been trying to share with her the truth about the abortions or ever since she had one. Now, it's taken many years since she had one until she started to accept the truth. And that required her releasing some of the error-based beliefs that would cause her, including the error-based beliefs about God, error-based beliefs about religion and so forth that caused her to believe only in science, error-based beliefs in spirituality that caused her now to investigate spiritual matters, error-based beliefs in of her own ability to process emotion even. She had to release some of those error-based beliefs emotionally before she could accept that abortion was a sin, even. Eventually, she got to accept it. Because the truth could now enter her emotionally. Once she accepted it, now she can start processing through repentance and desiring God's forgiveness, which she is now doing. So she's already doing in that regard, with regard to abortion. She needs to do that in other aspects of her life. And it's the same process as what she's done with the abortion issue. Exactly the same process, but it has to be engaged emotionally.
Now, you and I have done a number of interviews about emotions. So there's a playlist about emotions and feelings, isn't there? Then there's also about how the human soul operates, how it actually works. And you've referenced that, so I'll put links to that in there. And in our very first assistance group, we are going to talk about facing the fear of being emotionally overwhelmed and making changes. So there's a lot of material coming up that will help her to be able to address this particular issue. It is a problem. And the majority of people on the earth have the problem. And the main reason why is because the majority of the people on the earth have been taught to be very selective emotionally. They only want to accept particularly emotions that feel nice, and they want to reject anything that feels not very nice. And there's going to be a lot of things you need to feel when you're in disharmony with God's love and truth that are not nice. And the majority of people can't cope with that. I had a person email me the other day, somebody who's known about divine truth for many years, and he's had his very first big emotional experience that lasted a few hours of crying, and he was beside himself crying and so forth. And he emailed me distressed about the fact that it happened. I've had days of 4 or 5 hours like that for nearly 12 years or whatever it is. So I'm not scared of that kind of emotional experience. But the average person on the planet is. And when you said the average person on the planet can't cope with that, I just want to say, no, the average person on the planet can cope with that.
Yes, what I mean is they believe they can't cope with it. They shut it down immediately.
I only correct it because I know that for a long time I used to tell myself that
you won't be able to cope.
That I can't cope. When the truth is I can, I'm just afraid about that emotionally overwhelming experience.
Afraid of getting judged, afraid of the experience yourself, of judging yourself. There's all sorts of things you do when you start going through that kind of experience. You're worried that you're going crazy. You're worried. All sorts of worries. You can't control all the other things that you want to control in your life. Exactly. And this is the main reason why the majority of people make very little progress on the earth with regard to God's love. You see, in the spirit world, again, we're not so worried about what everybody thinks. So generally we observe other people, doing similar things, and so then we worry less, and then we go ahead with doing things that we wouldn't contemplate on earth. My suggestion to you is stop worrying about how it's going to look and how it's going to feel and how distressed you're going to be and how hard it might be and so forth and all these other things, and just do it. And when you do it, the fears will come up naturally and you'll be able to process through them and release them. And as you release each new fear, which is a false expectation appearing real, you will absorb some truth from God. And then obviously you'll also be able to be in a position of feeling God's love more.
Okay, all right. Current mainstream spiritual teachings all point to big upcoming changes, and that energies are incoming to change the hearts and minds of all and make us aware of the spirit world and truth. Is there any truth to this, and is this why you are here now?
Yes, there is a truth to this, and yes, myself and the 13 others that came, have all come particularly for this purpose. And the main reason why spirits in the spirit world are talking about it is because they've all been told that it's happening. Of course, they don't recognise me as the source of it because I disagree with their teachings. And so for many of them, there's confusion. They know that this is bound to happen. They think it's through somebody agreeing with their beliefs. And so they do not support us doing it, and in fact, many times oppose us doing it. But even through the opposition, God will accomplish what God intends to do, and in the end, I feel that God's truth will reach the planet if we stay on the course that we came to follow.
Yeah.
Most of these spirits have no idea that we are the people that are going to be doing it. No, most of the spirits have no concept of that. And the reason why is because our belief systems, well, God's truth, disagrees completely with their belief systems. And they think that a person who's going to come and change the planet should agree with their belief systems.
Yeah.
And that's why they do not support the people, the very people that they're talking about, that they're prophesying about, have actually already come, and they don't support them. Yeah. And that's the reason why.
Okay. Final question. Have there been any additional people who have reincarnated after you and the other 13 came?
Not to my knowledge. At this stage, I don't believe there is, because they're all waiting to see the results of our experiment and seeing what the outcomes may be. I do feel, though, that in the future, some of the people who have been aborted and miscarried, who reach the condition of at one-ment with God and at one-ment with their soul mate, so into a soul union state, I do believe that many of those, particularly if both halves had that misfortune, that they may attempt to come back to Earth and return, so that they can have the Earth experience again. But it's not going to be anything like the experience they would have had anyway. Yeah. So there is really no need for any person in that condition to return to Earth. The only reason why we did is because we noticed that the Earth itself wasn't embracing the principles of God's truth, and that it needed some more. And as soon as we worked out how to return, we decided that we desired to return to assist that process to occur, because the Earth needs to know the truth, and it will greatly affect have a beautiful positive outcome if people accept it. Yeah. And that's why we decided to come. Yeah. But there is really not, that motivation does not exist for other people to come. And that's one reason why I feel quite strongly that it's probably highly unlikely anybody will come, aside from the people who came, the 14 people who did come.
Have you had the feeling in the past that there were others? I can't remember.
I had the suspicion that there were others thinking about it, but not who were in the condition who were thinking about it.
I see. Yeah.
So the feeling I have is that there are spirits in the spirit world currently who know now how to return to Earth, who currently believe that they would like to return to Earth and are not yet in the condition to return to Earth. However, once they reach the condition of a soul union, I feel it's highly unlikely they will desire to return to Earth. Yeah. And it's highly unlikely that desire will remain. Yeah. Yes. So at this stage, my feeling is, yes, there's quite a lot of spirits who feel they would like to return to Earth. And I'm not talking about spirits who try to reincarnate using the terminology of it, but I'm talking about spirits who have developed enough in love to understand the truth about it. But unfortunately, they yet do not realise that once they reach the condition of being able to come, that their own motivation for coming might have disappeared.
Yeah. Great. Well, and Kathy finishes with, much thanks and love to you both.
It's our pleasure, Kathy. Yeah. And yes, it's lovely to be able to answer your questions. These are the questions that a lot of people who are new to Divine Truth ask, and so that's why we've included this as a feedback session. And we hope that we can address many of the issues in a more succinct way once we begin a whole series of FAQs on different subjects such as these. Yeah.
Of course, we're really busy now with assistance groups for really a couple of years. Yes. Hopefully within those couple of years we'll start some FAQ series, but we're going to be producing a large body of work that's really focused on helping people really with one of those questions that Kathy had about how she shifts from this intellectual feeling she'd like to do this to having an emotion, a soul-based desire to do it.
Because that is the key.
It is.
Like whatever we present as truth, you will not accept intellectually unless when you've got an emotional condition inside of yourself that opposes the acceptance. And so the key part is getting God's love into the soul and doing everything you possibly can to get God's love into your soul first. And then once God's love enters your soul, God's truth will enter your soul. And God's truth is universally unchangeable. When you receive God's love, you will receive the same truth that I've received.
Yeah.
And you will know it to be true then.
It sort of simplifies the whole thing, doesn't it? And
it does.
So if we can help people make that shift,
yes,
then they'll ask us far more sort of these kind of questions, because a lot of them will be answered even just through receiving God's love consistently.
Yes, and these kind of questions, which are driven a lot by some fears that people have, generally disappear once you start focusing on the reception of God's love and the reception of God's truth. That being said, truth is always going to have a fascination for humankind, and new truth is always going to have a fascination, but there is also an issue there. We cannot receive new truth when our soul is in opposition to it. And we also cannot receive and understand God's truth unless we've received some of God's love first. Yeah. And so this is why receiving God's love is such a key part of our development emotionally and our development for our future. And so my suggestion is focus on receiving God's love as your primary objective. Answering these questions, many of these questions will easily be answered as you receive and have a personal experience. That's what's happened for me. By the time I passed in the 1st century, I understood how the spirit world worked. I understood why all these spirits were affecting the earth. I understood, why there were influences occurring and what the influences were occurring through and the attractions that were occurring. And I could see the colours that were involved and what those colours meant. And, all those particular things can easily be seen the more that you feel, the more that you embrace, God's love and actually progress in that regard. So what I said in the 1st century applies, and that is seek first God's love, and then all these other things will be added to you. All this truth will come to you, and you'll understand it far better than you can now just with an intellectual understanding. Yeah. So I see a lot of people still trying to get an intellectual understanding and still being argumentative even with that which is emotional, really. Our argumentative spirit is emotionally based. We've got something in our soul opposing our ability to accept God's truth in that location. Yeah. And instead of dealing with that emotion, it causes them to argue and to, philosophize and so forth. They try to understand intellectually, but you can't. Yeah. And this is why it's a narrow path. It's a narrow path because the majority of people don't know, and they don't understand how to give up their intellect and focus on their emotional development. Yeah. And in particular, they are unable to receive God's love because of their current emotional condition. So the really important thing is to focus firstly on your relationship with God, and that's why with the assistance groups we will be focusing on primarily on that. Yeah. A lot of these questions that you've asked, Kathy, have been answered in the past. And many of the people who have heard us for years and years and years would probably be able to ream off the answer that I'd possibly give. However, they have not personally experienced it, and they don't really know. And it's only when you personally experience something that you really will know. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for your time, darling.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And I enjoyed answering some of those questions because it's lovely to sometimes answer the questions of a new person who's not and also a person who's not like the last few feedback sessions we give, where the people asking the questions really have strongly held opinions and they basically just want to argue. Yeah. So it's lovely that you're more open, Kathy, to actually receiving some truth and not being argumentative in the way that you propose these questions. And so this is one of the reasons why we wanted to answer them. Yeah.